Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Vaccine mandates are working. Biden wants more of them. At least 4 U.S. Black women and girls were murdered per day last year. Michigan Solicitor General becomes first Arab American Muslim woman to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court. University of Toledo celebrates Muslim Heritage Month with events through October. TikTok sensation declares he is a Muslim. Our top story tonight. U.S. President Joe Biden is calling for more employers to impose COVID-19 vaccine requirements, saying it's good for the economy. President Biden's remarks came during a visit Thursday to a construction project in the Chicago suburb of Elk Grove Village. He toured the area's technology park and visited a Microsoft data center being built by Clayco. This Midwestern company is requiring COVID vaccinations or weekly testing for its employees. The president has sought to boost the nation's vaccination rates through sweeping mandates on businesses with more than 100 employees.
So today, I'm calling on more employers to act. My message is require your employees to get vaccinated. With vaccinations, we're going to beat this pandemic finally. Without them, we face endless months of chaos in our hospitals, damage to our economy, and anxiety in our schools, and empty restaurants, and much less commerce.
According to a White House report, mandates are in place at 25% of businesses. At least 4 Black women and girls were murdered every day in the United States in 2020, according to FBI statistics released last week. This is a sharp increase from the year before. The FBI recorded at least 405 more murders of Black women and girls in 2020. Experts caution even that stark number probably represents an undercount. To the families of victims and local activists, the data release is a reminder that violence against Black women and girls often goes ignored, and that it should be made a more urgent public priority. Jennifer Redmond, whose 19-year-old daughter, Saraya Jade, was killed last September, said it is sad that a lot of cases aren't taken seriously. A Virginia county paid a nonprofit $500,000 after trying to block construction of a Muslim cemetery. The Stafford County Board of Supervisors voted 4-2 to settle a religious freedom lawsuit filed by the All-Muslim Association of America. The Virginia-based nonprofit provides low-cost burial and funeral services to Muslim families in need. With its existing cemetery nearing capacity, the association bought land in the county zoned for cemetery use. But the county abruptly changed its rules to block construction on the group's cemetery proposal. In June 2020, Muslim advocates and Milbank LLP represented the association in its lawsuit against the county. The U.S. Department of Justice also filed a suit. The county board subsequently repealed its ordinance in October of 2020. The University of Toledo will host several events in recognition of Muslim Heritage Month. Its Office of Multicultural Student Success and the Muslim Student Association have scheduled programs beginning with Ask a Muslim on Monday, October 11th. Ailia Naqvi, president of the Muslim Student Association, said the in-person and virtual events are accessible to all students. Michigan Solicitor General Fadwa Hammoud made history Tuesday as the first Arab American Muslim woman to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court. The case she was arguing originated in Kalamazoo in 2007. Hammoud said arguing before the Supreme Court was the highlight of her career. A first-generation American, Hammoud is a Fordson High School graduate. She and the Attorney General both went to Wayne State Law School. Google announced Wednesday it would invest $1 billion in boosting Africa's internet access and startup scene. The tech giant is eyeing a youth market increasingly armed with smartphones. Spread over 5 years, the investment includes funding for Google's Equiano subsea cable, a major private infrastructure project. It's aimed at ramping up Africa's high-speed connections. Google Africa's chief Nitin Gajria told AFP that Africa had 300 million people online today and another 300 million expected to come online over the next 5 years. Journalists Maria Ressa of the Philippines and Dmitry Muratov of Russia won the Nobel Peace Prize on Friday. This was for fighting for freedom of expression at a time when democracy is increasingly under threat. Ressa, who is also a US citizen, is co-founder of Rappler, an investigative journalism digital media company. Muratov is the co-founder of Russia's leading independent newspaper, Novaya Gazeta. Chairwoman of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, Barrett Rees Anderson, said that the pair were honored for their effort to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. She also said they are representatives of all journalists who stand up for this ideal in a world in which democracy and freedom of the press face increasingly adverse conditions. Abubakar Tambadou, former Minister of Justice of Gambia, were among the nominees for the Nobel Prize for taking Burma to the International Court of Justice for the genocide of Rohingya people. Amnesty International has condemned the Premier League's owners and directors for sportswashing Saudi Arabia's human rights record. The human rights group has lobbied English football chiefs for more than a year to reject a proposed takeover. A Saudi-led consortium is closing in on a deal to buy struggling Newcastle. The controversial deal looks set to receive a green signal after settling of a piracy dispute over television rights in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Under the proposed $408 million deal, the Saudi Public Investment Fund would have an 80% stake in the club, with other investors buying 20%. A British woman who joined Daesh with her young children is asking UK politicians to allow them to return. BBC reports Nicole Jack and her 3 daughters are being held at a detention camp in Syria. They are among thousands of wives and children of Daesh fighters. She said the UK government must not sweep them under the rug. The UK government has been unwilling to let those who joined Daesh back into the country, viewing them as potential national security threats. Jack left London with her husband and children to avoid splitting the family when her husband joined Daesh in 2015. In a related story, 11 women and 37 children of Daesh families have been flown to Germany and Denmark by their governments. Human Rights Watch says that nearly 43,000 people linked to Daesh, including 27,000 children, remain detained illegally in inhumane or degrading conditions in Syria. The United Nations warned on Tuesday that more than 5 billion people could have difficulty accessing water by 2050. In 2018, over 3 billion people had inadequate access to water for at least 1 month, according to a new report from the World Meteorological Organization, or WMO. WMO Chief Petteri Talas said that we need to wake up to the looming water crisis. The report comes just weeks before the UN COP26 Climate Change Conference, which will be held October 31st to November 12th in Glasgow. The WMO stressed that over the last 20 years, the levels of water stored on land had dropped at a rate of 1 centimeter per year. The biggest losses are in Antarctica and Greenland, but many highly populated lower latitude areas are experiencing significant water losses. The agency said that there were major ramifications for water security, as only 0.5% of global water is usable and available fresh water. Social media sensation Khaby Lame, who has about 115 million followers on TikTok, has revealed he is a practicing Muslim. Lame said he was born in a devout Muslim family in Senegal in March 2000. He was raised in a public housing complex in Chivasso, Italy. In a video posted on social media, Lame answered the most asked questions about him on Google. Lame earlier gained much support from his Muslim audience after publicly showing support for the Palestinian struggle. A suicide bomb attack on worshippers at a Shia mosque in the Afghan city of Kunduz killed at least 55 people on Friday. It is the bloodiest assault since the Taliban took power in Afghanistan. In a statement released on its Telegram channels, Daesh said that their suicide bomber detonated an explosive vest amid a crowd. The recent Daesh attacks appeared designed to further destabilize Afghanistan in the wake of the Taliban takeover. The extremist group, bitter rivals of the Taliban, has repeatedly targeted Shias in a bid to stir up sectarian violence in Sunni-majority Afghanistan. Matiullah Rouhani, Director of Culture and Information in Kunduz for Afghanistan's new Taliban government, confirmed to AFP that the deadly incident was a suicide attack and said that 46 people had died and 143 were wounded. Mulawi Dos Muhammad, Taliban's security chief of Kunduz, accused the attackers of trying to foment trouble between Shias and Sunnis and insisted that there was no dispute between the Taliban and the minority. We assure our Shia brothers that in the future we will provide security for them and that such problems will not happen to them, he said. Suburban Chicago's mom, Yasmina Blackburn, wanted American Muslim girls to see themselves reflected as part of American culture. So she wrote a letter to the American Girl doll company seeking Muslim representation in its product line. Now, American Girl, owned by Mattel, has launched an Eid al-Fitr doll outfit that Blackburn helped design. She also edited the short story accompanying the outfit. Blackburn told the Daily Herald, "It's important for Muslim kids to feel their holidays are recognized. This fall, American Girl is debuting a collection of 6 cultural celebration outfits representing the Lunar New Year, Eid al-Fitr, Diwali, Hanukkah, Christmas, and Kwanzaa." Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September. I am a single father of two who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To discuss the case of Palestinian-born U.S. citizen Mohammed Salah, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, who's with one of his attorneys. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Mohammed Salah was a Chicago-based American of Palestinian heritage. Anytime Israel will bomb the occupied Palestine, he will organize people and have demonstrations. Well, one day he decided to do little more when Israel expelled a number of Palestinians to Lebanon. He collected some money, took it to the occupied land to distribute to the families. And that's where he was nabbed by Israel. He was tortured for 5 years, came to Chicago, and back in the US, America declared him a terrorist. And it took a long fight. And one of those fighters who led that legal battle for him is Matt Pierce. He's with us. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Pleasure to be here.
Matt Pierce is an attorney in Chicago and active in peace and justice cases. And he was one of the leading attorneys who fought the case to free Mohammed Salah. What were the main charges against him?
You know, Mohammed was subjected to a series of legal actions, both criminal charges ultimately by the government, but also the blocking order that was issued by President Clinton while he was in Israeli military prison, and a civil lawsuit brought by the family of a man named David Boehm, who was killed by Hamas in Israel some years earlier. So we represented Mohammed in multiple legal matters, including working with the Treasury Department to just try and get him enough freedom to function. But the criminal charges that were brought against him after several years were basically of two sorts. One was a RICO or racketeering charge, which basically was predicated on the claim that he had aided terrorism by bringing the money to the Holy Land, as you've just described. That charge he was acquitted of. He was also charged with obstruction of justice with regard to an answer that he gave in that civil case that I referred to, a written answer to interrogatories. Those are written discovery questions in a civil litigation, in which he had denied basically having had any contact with persons affiliated with Hamas. The jury found him guilty on that charge, found that he had some contacts, and he did serve a little over a year in federal prison.
So terrorism charges were some type of things which a lot of people are still sitting in prison system in America, especially after 9/11. His case was before 9/11. Why it came alive after 9/11?
It was before and after 9/11. It's a very good question. And the whole world changed for Muhammad and for all of us after 9/11, and changed for the worse. The chronology basically is that Muhammad is arrested in Israel in 95, I believe. He maybe even a little earlier than that, 94, 93. He was released in 97. While he was imprisoned in Israel, he was subjected to what's called a blocking order by President Clinton under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, basically declaring him a terrorist, the only United States citizen as of that time and perhaps since to have been declared a terrorist by his own country. He was a U.S. citizen at the time. And the first work that we did was simply to get the licenses necessary for somebody under such an extraordinary blocking order to function at a basic human level. The blocking order prevented Muhammad from giving or receiving goods and services from any United States person and vice versa. That is, nobody present in the United States or any of its territories, citizen or otherwise, was allowed to render any services, any help, any material assistance of any sort to Muhammad Salah without a license from the Treasury Department. So he spent the first several years of representing Muhammad, preparing a lawsuit to challenge this status, and negotiating a series of licenses with the Treasury Department, which allowed him to live some semblance of a normal life, but not very effectively. Most importantly, during that time period, we were in regular and very constructive negotiations with the United States Attorney's Office to get the blocking order lifted and to get him taken off the list. And we were this close to success when September 11th happened. And a few days after September 11th, I got a call from the United States Attorney's Office telling me basically we were now living in a different world, and all discussions with regard to releasing Muhammad from this burden of being a specially designated terrorist and having no United States person allowed to interact with him economically or otherwise, those negotiations ended. And not long thereafter, the Boeing case was filed. And so we successfully defended Muhammad in that case, by the way. He was charged with having aided Hamas, who then in turn killed David Boehm, and his aid to Hamas from bringing the money was alleged to have caused indirectly the murder of David Boehm. He was acquitted of those charges. And while those charges were pending, the criminal charges came down that I've just described. So as you can see, it was sort of a cascade of burdens that were placed on this man's life.
When he was arrested in Israel, he was tortured. What was the nature of that torture?
Muhammad was tortured. It's an acknowledged fact that the interrogation techniques used by the Israeli military, in particular in Israeli military prisons, violate international standards and are in fact torture. I will tell you also that I had Muhammad examined by an expert on Middle Eastern government and politics, as well as perhaps the foremost forensic pathologist in the United States. And they both concurred that Muhammad had in fact been tortured by the Israelis. The nature of the torture was various, and all techniques that are well documented and well known with regard to prisoners in Israeli military prison. One was that they would tie him to a very low slanted chair so that while he was sitting in the most uncomfortable position possible, and they would interrogate him for hours in that position. They left him in freezing cold cells for days on a time, pumping in extremely loud rock music so that he couldn't sleep. The cold, of course, made him exhausted. The noise kept him awake. He was also subjected to a series of other techniques, including on occasion violent shaking while wearing a hood, which is another technique that is well documented. So sadly, I would have to say that he was subjected to the standard series of torture techniques that the Israeli military was using at the time.
While he was in prison, did the United States, who Mohammed Salah was a citizen, provided any consular services? Did they interfere to stop the torture? Did anything was done for him?
As I recall, he had one or two visits from consular representatives who basically told him there was nothing that they could do. You know, it's funny, it's poignant, but while Muhammad was in prison, he learned to speak Hebrew, self-taught, spent his time learning Hebrew. And he befriended some of the guards, the military prison guards. And one of them in particular would show him acts of kindness, including encouragement. He would stop by the cell periodically and say, you know, stay strong, Salah. You're going to go home to your family someday. But really, other than this guard who clearly had some humanism that he brought to his work, Muhammad was essentially unaided except by his defense lawyer in Israel.
Tell us why President Clinton took such a deep interest. He didn't have anything else to do in life than go after a person who is U.S. citizen being tortured in Israel, and probably U.S. was aware of it because they say there's not much we can do about it.
I can't speak for President Clinton, of course. And if I could talk to him, I would have lots of questions to ask him about this case and many other actions that were taken under his administration. But there was Muhammad's cases, and there really were several, can't be understood other than the fact that there were powerful organizations and individuals in the Jewish community in the United States, and I am Jewish, by the way, the Jewish community in the United States who pressured the government to clamp down on everything and anything happening in the United States that they thought was pro-Palestinian. So that, you know, patterns of behavior, such as raising money for people in the Palestinian communities of the Middle East, right? An activity that was done by the Irish in Noraid in Northern Ireland, that was done by Jews at the founding of the State of Israel, that has been done by communities in the United States to help their brothers and sisters in home countries as long as I can remember. But it was politicized in the context of the Middle East, and it was sort of radioactive politicization in the United States because of the disproportionate power, particularly in the Democratic Party at the time, of organized Jewish lobbying groups.
How was the secret evidence used in this trial?
The Israeli government flew over for the trial intelligence agents who testified in a locked courtroom before the judge and the jury and the lawyers and Muhammad, but we were not allowed in the courtroom because, again, we'd been excluded from the courtroom part of the criminal prosecution. And they provided testimony, presumably in support of the charge against Muhammad, which was, again, aiding a terrorist organization. So the Israelis, I'm sure urged on by the Jewish community of the United States, took the extraordinary step of sending secret intelligence agents, undercover intelligence agents, to testify in an American courtroom to try and convict Mohammed Salah of aiding terrorism. And the jury, 12 normal, regular, everyday U.S. citizens, performed one of the real miracles of our justice system. And they told the government no. And I still remember, I was in the courtroom when the verdict was returned, and Mohammed came over and hugged me and was overjoyed And I said to him, you know, Mohammed, you were convicted of the obstruction of justice charge, the lesser of the two charges, and you are likely to be sentenced to prison. And he said, oh, I know. He said, but you don't understand what a wonderful thing just happened. He said, the United States government spent millions of dollars trying to imprison me as something that I'm not, a terrorist. And 12 normal, everyday citizens who I've never met before and who probably knew very little about my world and who I am, except what they heard in this courtroom, told the government no. And the government had no recourse but to accept that decision. He said, you need to understand that this couldn't have happened in any other country in the world. So at the moment that Mohammed knew that he was going to end up being torn away from his family again and sent to another prison, a much kinder and gentler prison, I must say, than what he faced in Israeli military prison, his thought was that he had chosen the right home country. It was poignant. It was poignant.
Is it normal for foreign agents to come and testify in the cases in the U.S. courts?
Totally extraordinary. Not familiar with it happening. It has not happened in any other case that I've been involved in. It has happened on very rare occasions in other cases. But generally, when it happens, it's in proceedings which are themselves secret, and so you never find out about it. For this to happen in a otherwise public criminal trial was extraordinary and largely unprecedented, and a sign of how toxic the times were, really.
When the Israeli agents with different names were testifying in the court and the court was closed, was there an opportunity for Mr. Salah's lawyers to question them?
Yes. Yes, they were cross-examined. But of course, since they were relying on confidential information gathered in Israel, the ability to effectively cross-examine is very, very limited.
So you did not see what they're relying on, but you were just talking to them while they're there.
Yeah, look, and I want to say, I reached out and retained for Mohammed an old friend and colleague, Michael Deutsch, to lead the defense team. And never have I been prouder of the fine work that Michael has done his whole career. He was a lion in the courtroom and it is a big part of the reason why the outcome was generally favorable for Mohammed.
Tell me why the Jewish Federation, not only they were sitting in the courtroom, their vice president and others, but on their website, they still have a celebratory note of him being convicted. And they claim that they have worked on these cases for years to say that how the Chicago community is supporting Palestine and things of this nature. Why, two communities living in the United States, living in Chicago, were unable to deal with the issue that they will be behind two different parties in the same United States court?
Because the last colonial effort of the 20th century was the creation of the State of Israel. And it was created in response to one of the most horrific crimes against humanity in the history of the world. And it was created with a lie and a myth that what is now the State of Israel was, as they said, a land without people for a people without land. Well, of course, it was not a land without people, nor, other than if you accept biblical mandate, did Jews have any right to take that land. And the geopolitical tension that has been created from that colonial occupation, which continues to this day, has misshapen the politics of this country, where there is a powerful organized Jewish community, which has, through many, but not all of its organizations, but many of its organizations historically, given blind support to the most repressive and inhumane policies of the Israeli government. I don't know what other answer I can give you.
Well, thank you so much, Ahmed Pierce, for your work. And I agree with you that particular case and the fight over it did mobilize Muslim community, that it makes a difference when you take a stand for justice in the United States. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your interest and for remembering this important matter.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube and Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.